The day that the lady at my local nail salon waxed off my entire left eyebrow was an oy vey kind of day, but not for the reason you may think. Let me start at the beginning. So I was laying there on the table, and I imagined that the butcher paper that they lay out for you should have been the first sign that something might wind up going wrong. So I lie down there, and the right eyebrow goes fine. She leaves behind the part I wanted to have left behind, and the rest of it was stuck to the paper. Gentlemen, you know what I'm talking about. And then she moved on to the next side, and I felt the rip as the paper came off, and it didn't strike me that anything had gone wrong until I, as a communication skills expert, picked up a few subtle signs that something perhaps had been amiss. So I'm going to share with you the subtle sign that I saw that something hadn't gone right. It was the woman who had done the waxing dropping to her knees and going, "Oh, sorry. Now again, as I mentioned, I'm a communication skills professional. So, you know, the average person would probably miss something like that. But I was trained to pick up on those subtle verbal and nonverbal cues that so many other people might miss. So I immediately put my hand up to where my left eyebrow had been and realized that there was a problem. And immediately my caregiver instinct kicked in because this woman was kneeling on the floor in a panic. And I said to her, "Don't worry, these things happen." I mean, it did, so they do. It's no big deal, and I'm sure these things grow back. And I think in my just sheer panic of what had happened, I think I gave her a tip. I think I did. So, but remember, as I said before, this was not even the oy vey part of the day. This was only the first part of the oy vey part of the day, because the next part was I had to go home. I had to go home where my husband, Michael, and my then 6-year-old twins, Jacob and Sophie, were waiting for me, not having imagined that I had experienced a personal tragedy. So I show up at my door and I walk into the house, and my husband Michael meets me at the door, and in probably one of the smartest acts in our 15 years of marriage, he took one look at me, turned on his heel, and went into the bedroom. Smart, right? Smart cookie. So he left me completely unprepared to face our 2 children alone, who were sitting at the kitchen table sorting fruit snacks by size, color, and shape. So I knew that there was food involved, so I was hoping they would be so involved with their food they wouldn't even notice what was happening. So I walked in, and as I predicted, my son Jacob didn't look up, and my daughter Sophie looked right up and said to me, with a giant smile on her face, "What happened?" And I explained to her that there had been a tragic accident and that the woman at the local nail salon had waxed off the part of the left eyebrow that I had been planning to keep. So she then said to me with an even bigger smile on her face, "How mad did you get?" And this was the moment that I was so proud when I reflected on how I had reacted in the nail salon, and I was so happy to have this kind of teachable moment to share with my daughter. And I said, "You know, sweetheart, Mommy didn't get mad because these things happen. It was no big deal, and these things grow back. So, honey, I didn't get angry at all." And that's when I remembered that anytime you think that you have a teachable moment, you are about to be taught a big lesson. So as I was enjoying the pride of my failure to react, my daughter Sophie was calculating all of the times that I had exploded at her for doing things significantly less tragic than what this woman had done to me at the nail salon. And it wasn't enough that she was processing them in her head. She was going to tell me all about it. So with her hands on her hips, she goes, "Wait a minute. I leave my shoes in the hallway, and you yell at me, and this woman waxed off your eyebrow, and nothing." And then she said, "Wait a minute. I take too long to turn off my lights at bedtime, and this woman waxes off your eyebrow, and nothing. I spend too much time picking out a stuffed animal for a road trip, and you scream at me, and this woman, everyone, waxes off your eyebrow, and nothing." And that's when I realized that the teachable moment and the oy vey day was for me. That's when I realized that, in fact, I have complete control over how I react and respond to things, and I was more likely to show my control with a perfect stranger where the relationship didn't really matter so much, but far more willing to blow my stack at somebody where the relationship really had deep meaning for me and significant long-term impact. And that was the moment that I said, I need to take control over whether I am reacting in the moment or taking time to figure out what kind of response would be the healthiest kind of response and would really further the relationship. So it was an oy vey day, but a day where I learned an awful lot about the power of reacting and responding in our personal relationships. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is who do we need to be and how do we need to show up and how should we be behaving in our relationships with our members, with our colleagues, with our coworkers, with our direct reports, and yes, with our family and friends, because all relationships are the same and require the same level of contribution and response from us. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And as this eyebrow moment was happening, I realized, in fact, that there are two kinds of stressors that all of us face. So one kind of stressor I call tornadoes. And I think the eyebrow situation absolutely falls into this category because a tornado is something that whips in, you don't expect it, you have no time to prepare, and it does cause damage. And some of us are better able to handle tornadoes, things that come in and shock us and leave destruction in its wake, and others of us get rattled to the core. And it's our job to figure out who are we and how do we behave when a tornado comes in, whether it's an angry member who walks into the JCC demanding face-to-face time with you on a day that you have 15 meetings scheduled and have no time for this kind of thing, to I am here from Long Island, New York, to something kind of like a tornado when Hurricane Sandy came in and whipped through and ripped apart our local JCCs. There was no way to prepare for it, and how we behave in the moment says an awful lot about who we are and says an awful lot about what people can come to depend on from our JCCs. So one kind of stressor is the tornado stressor. The other kind of stressor I like to think about as termites. And these are the things that eat away at you and eat away at you and eat away at you over time until the foundation no longer can hold up. And these were the things that my daughter Sophie was pointing out, the little things that ate away at me, like the 15th time I saw shoes in the hallway, or the 10th time that I yelled, "Lights out!" Or for you, it may be the 6th time that your supervisor cancels your weekly supervision appointment. Or the fact that you're trying to talk to a colleague and your colleague is talking to you like this. Yeah, one sec. Those are things that nibble and nibble and nibble away at the core of a relationship. And our job is to figure out, are we better able to handle tornadoes or termites? What's your natural strength? And the other thing that we need to figure out for ourselves is how can we be better prepared to handle both tornadoes and termites, because both of them are going to happen in our interpersonal relationship, whether it's with members, whether it's with staff, whether it's in our family lives as well. So one of the things we need to think about is what pushes our buttons. And this is just a piece of advice for you. If you are going to push my buttons, it might be best to avoid the one that launch missiles. Every single one of us have things that push our buttons, and our members in particular have things that feel like termites to them because they eat away and eat away and eat away at the trust in our relationship, and we need to know what those are. So we're going to take a couple of minutes to talk about some of the things that pushes our members' buttons. And let's see if any of these sound familiar. Hopefully they won't, but you never know. I don't have time to answer your questions right now. How do you think that might be something that eats away at the relationship with our members? I'm going to take that laughter to mean, oh, we understand already, we don't have to talk about it. Okay? That's not my department. Okay? What else pushes our members' buttons? I don't know. Saying to them, I don't know. I don't care either. I know you're saying, not in my JCC, but in somebody's JCC, this is happening. Those are the rules. I don't make them. Okay. Read the sign. Well, it wasn't me that you spoke to, right? And if anybody here has ever been the one to say that, know that by the second or third time a member hears that, those termites are getting ready to destroy the foundation. Okay? You're new here? Ha! Good luck. These are the kinds of things that destroy relationships with our members, and the fact of the matter is you don't actually even have to say them. Right? So in all of our communication, there are three parts. There is the verbal part, the words that you choose. There's the vocal part, the way in which you use your tone of voice. And there is the body language part, the nonverbal part, which is the way in which we convey our information. Which of those three do you think has the biggest impact in our communication? Verbal, vocal, or nonverbal? Nonverbal. You're absolutely right. So the studies show that in terms of impact, the words that we use are about 7%. The tone of our voice is about 38% of the impact, and the remaining 55% is the way in which we use our body. So even if you are never saying, it wasn't me that you spoke to, I don't have time to answer your questions right now, the way in which you use your tone of voice and the way in which you hold your body speaks volumes. And all of that factors into the relationships that we have with our members, the relationships that we have with our staff, the relationships that we have with our colleagues. I remember when I first started doing executive and management coaching that I was working with the executive director of a nonprofit organization, and the feedback on the 360 was that people found her to be defensive and dismissive and off-putting. And I noticed that whenever she sat in her office, she sat in her office like this. No matter who walked in, no matter what they were talking to her about, she sat there like this. And I finally brought it to her attention, and she said to me, you know, I sit under a vent. It's really cold here. I said, do me a favor, get yourself a pashmina and change all of your relationships in one fell swoop. And she did. She did. She wore a wrap to work, and it was the difference of body language between being closed off and having the opportunity to express herself through the use of her body that actually improved the relationships that she was having with her people. So for our members, we need to think about that it's not just the words that we say, but the way in which we use our tone of voice and our body language as well. So we know what are some of the things that push our members' buttons. Let's take a moment to think about what are some of the things that make our members and each other feel rewarded. So examples include to have our situation understood and validated, right? We want people to understand what's going on with us, as our members do, and to make us feel right for having brought it up. Not only do we need to have our situation understood and validated, we want to have our emotions understood and validated. We want to have somebody tell us that it's okay for us to feel however it is that we're feeling, rather than telling us, you know, Jen, you really shouldn't be getting angry about that. You're making too big a deal. When I tell you calm down, you're making too big a deal, how does that make you feel? Maybe put on the spot in the middle of a keynote? Yeah, okay. Good. See, again, I'm a communication skills expert. I can read these cues where she said, back off, sister. Okay? People want to have prompt, friendly, willing attention, both in the words we choose, the way in which we use our body, and the way in which we use our voice. People want to have knowledgeable service, Not my department, not my department. I don't know when that program is happening. I don't know when that class starts. They want everybody in your JCC to know all of the information they need so that any single one of you is the right point of entry. They want to have the opportunity to maintain their dignity and not feel belittled or have their feelings and issues cast aside. They want to be given the chance to give feedback to you. And they want to have the very best possible solution offered to them the first time. So several years ago, my family and I were flying from New York to Minneapolis to attend my nephew's bar mitzvah. And our flight was late, and I knew that we were going to get to the hotel late, so I called ahead, and I said, we're going to be showing up late, but please hold our room. When we got to the hotel, it was about 1 in the morning. And the front desk clerk was there, and he typed something into the computer to try and bring our room up, and he got the wrong password. And he typed something again, and he got the wrong password again. And by the third time he got the wrong password, the computer locked him out of the system. So he starts using some language that I didn't know they used in Minnesota. I thought it was only for us in New York. And my 2 kids, of course, loved every minute of that. And he starts calling headquarters for the hotel and trying to make some inquiries about how to get on the computer. He is told that somebody from headquarters will call him back between 20 minutes and 24 hours from now. It is now 2 in the morning, and he is still banging at the computer, cursing out loud, and trying to get somebody from headquarters to help him. 90 minutes later, he says, you know what? I'm just going to give you guys a different room for the night, and we'll sort this out in the morning. 90 minutes later, which means that he had a best possible solution that needed to be offered to us the very first time, as opposed to 90 minutes into it. And that is what our colleagues, that is what our members, that is what each of us expect from one another, to be given the best possible solution offered to us the very first time, rather than having people jump through hoops. So some of these behaviors count for our members and for one another as things that whip in and shock us and create some destruction in its path, and others of them really eat away at us over time. And regardless of which kind they are, termites or tornadoes, both of them have one thing in common, which is that they erode trust. They erode the trust in our relationships. As Warren Bennis tells us, trust is the lubrication that makes it possible for organizations to work. It is the magical WD-40 that all of us need in order for our relationships to progress forward. And trust actually has 4 unique ingredients that are a part of any relationship that we have. And these 4 ingredients were highlighted by researcher Charles Feltman in his book, The Thin Book of Trust. And I have to tell you, what a waste for my first Kindle purchase to purchase a book called The Thin Book of Trust. I should have saved it for the Steve Jobs biography. So here are the 4 ingredients of trust that Feltman highlights. The first one is sincerity, meaning what you say and saying what you mean, plus a dash of kindness. Why is that dash of kindness so important? That dash of kindness is so important is that I may want to tell you everything I'm thinking right now, but if it doesn't pass the kindness test, I probably should come up with another way to verbalize it or keep it to myself. But when our members believe that we are telling them the truth, they trust us. The second ingredient in trust is reliability. And reliability means that we do what we say we are going to do. We make good on our commitments. So the first ingredient is building trust through words. The second ingredient is building trust through deed. The third ingredient of trust is competence, is that our members need to believe that we have the knowledge and skill and ability to do the job that we were set out to do. And if we can't do it, that we know who the right person is to get that job done or that piece of business done for them. And the fourth ingredient is care. And the way that Feltman defines care is so unique and so important that I want to just take a moment to share it with you. The way that Feltman defines care is that when I am making decisions and taking actions that affect you, you know that I have had your needs, interests, and values in mind. Doesn't mean that I'm going to decide in your favor or the way you'd like it, but that you actually believe that I've thought of you when I've made a decision. And our colleagues and our coworkers and our members want to believe that even if we have to make a decision that doesn't go in their favor, that we have considered what's important to them. And those are the ingredients of trust. And I know yesterday morning we had a speaker who came from Franklin Covey, and Stephen Covey, in fact, which is the Covey half of Franklin Covey, developed a model, what he calls the relationship bank account, which is really how we show our trust with one another. And the relationship bank account model is this. Every relationship we have has a particular emotional and functional balance of how we're doing with each other. And certain actions that we take put trust into the relationship. Those are called deposits. And certain actions we do actually suck trust out of the relationships, and those are called withdrawals. And every single one of them we have deposits and withdrawals, and our members have them with us. So there are some general examples of things that deposits may include. You sort of show me by a raise of hand if this one feels like you. So does it feel like somebody's putting a deposit in your relationship bank account when they offer appreciation to you? Yes? Okay. When somebody is loyal to you when you're not there. Okay? When somebody apologizes. Yep. Okay? When somebody receives feedback from you without getting defensive. Yes? Okay? And knowing and using your name. When people remember your name and know who you are. And in fact, in Charles Duhigg's New York Times best-selling book, The Power of Habit, he talks about a study that was conducted of health clubs. And the study that the health clubs were doing was to try to figure out what factors would increase membership and member attendance. And they did all sorts of interventions, that the kind of things you might come up with. They bought new equipment, they repainted the health clubs, they brought in a variety of classes and exceptional teachers. And what they found was that there was one factor and one factor alone that drove up people's likelihood of coming to the gym repeatedly. And it was if the people at the welcome desk called you by name. Called you by name. That dramatically increased whether people came to the gym or not, because they felt noticed, they felt recognized, and they also felt noticed if they didn't come as well. So those are some examples of deposits, and research actually supports that these things make a difference in terms of attendance and involvement in our JCCs. Now, there are things that put trust in the bank account and things that pull trust out. Some withdrawals include when you give feedback and it's ignored, right? When you don't greet somebody, when you withhold information from somebody, canceling supervision meetings is a huge withdrawal for people, and not following up in a timely manner or at all. So these are some ones that are in general, but I decided it would probably be good to get specific. This is one specific one for me. This is a withdrawal. The fact that somebody had to create a sign to publicize it is quite surprising to me, but I just wanted to let you know, if we are in the bathroom together, please just let me finish my business before you ask me to sign your book, okay? So let's find out what some other withdrawals are. Joy. Joy shared with us some things that count as deposits and withdrawals for her. So if you want to build trust with Joy, Joy likes it when you notice when she has gone above and beyond the call of duty. And I think, Alan, you really started that nicely today, because with this conference, Joy has gone above and beyond the call of duty. And let's give her one more round of applause. Watch, the withdrawal will be people clapping for me in public. Joy's withdrawal is glossing over her ideas and then taking credit for them. Can anybody else relate? Yep. Okay. So we now have Gustavo Rimberg from Toronto. So for those of you who work with Gustavo, you might already know that a deposit for him is getting feedback. Okay? This really builds trust in your relationship with Gustavo. And a withdrawal is when you choose not to participate. He likes people to be involved. And so now you know the secret code to building trust with Gustavo and withdrawing trust from him. What does Mark have to say? So Mark tells us that a real way to build trust with him is when you reflect on your own practice or your life before you come to Mark and ask him what to do. Okay, sounds like a good coach, Mark. You sound like a really good coach. And a way that you can withdraw trust from your relationship with Mark is when you aren't listening and you shift the focus to yourself and your own experience. You know, that reminds me of a time when something happened to me. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to suck the trust right out of our relationship. Okay. Carrie Key from Delaware. All right, that's a lot of noise from a very small state. So what works with Carrie? So for Carrie, a deposit is letting her and her supervisor know how she adds value, right? So don't keep it a secret if Carrie is doing a good job. Let her supervisor know as well. And a withdrawal is answering the phone, checking email, and getting distracted in the middle of the meeting. How many of you can relate to that, right? Good, we had a whole keynote about it yesterday, absolutely. And then last but never least, Alan tells us that a deposit is to look him in the eye when we speak to him. Your eye is pretty far away from me right now. Look him in the eye when you speak to him. And a withdrawal is having no sense of urgency in your work. Okay? So now you have the secret code to 5 people who you might work with to know how to build trust and what might take trust away from it. So here's what I want to give us as a little bit of food for thought. What counts as a deposit for you specifically? And it may be completely unique to your own DNA, but what is it that somebody can do, one behavior, one action, one thing somebody can say that puts trust in the relationship? And what counts as a withdrawal for you? And who really needs to know this about you because it's important? So I want to give you all a minute, and I want you to turn to somebody sitting next to you or behind you or in front of you and share with them either one withdrawal or one deposit. Okay, so let's hear from a couple of you. What is something that counts as a deposit? How can we put trust in our relationship bank account with you? Or what is something that counts as a withdrawal? Who'd like to share one with us? Great, come on up and tell us, just stand up, not come on up. I think there's an electrified fence over here, so yeah. Tell us who you are and what one is.
I'm Sarah from West Hartford, Connecticut with Mendel JCC. And I really believe that they're able to open up and trust me enough with their goodies so that I can share with other people.
Goodies. What do you mean by goodies?
Well, they're what they've learned, their experiences, how they've gone into the fitness world, what their journey was, and how they got there.
Okay, so when people share their journey with you, that counts as a deposit. Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, who else has one they'd like to share with us? Yes, gentleman in the back.
When an employee anticipates a problem and solves it before it gets to you.
Ah, very good. And who are you?
I'm Tim Cornely from the Boston JCC.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Let's see. What else? Who else has one? Yes?
Hi, I'm Katie from the JCC in Delaware. For me, when my supervisor notices that I've been putting in a lot of extra hours and says, you know what, you've worked 10 days in a row, take an afternoon, do this, take some time for yourself. To notice that, it feels great for me.
Great. So to be noticed and to be given some me time. Excellent. Thank you. One more. Anybody have a withdrawal they want to share with us? Yes, over in the corner. You're going to have to speak loudly. I don't know if the mics can get to you, Don. Lonnie's jogging.
Yeah, here I come. people who are negative and pessimistic and say, oh, we've done that before, it hasn't worked, it's not even worth trying again.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you for that one. I think that counts as a deposit for lots of people. So, look, sometimes we can make assumptions in general, and I had given you a couple of slides of suggestions of things that in general feel like withdrawals and deposits, and sometimes you just have to ask and find out if something counts as a withdrawal or a deposit. So I actually have a question. Is Rachel Greenspan in the room? So Rachel, would it count as a deposit if we all sang happy birthday to you? Okay, yep. Happy birthday to you. I'm mic'd. You sing. Happy birthday, dear Rachel. Happy birthday to you. Woo! Okay, well, you're right, you have to pay rights for that. Is there another one? What's the name? Joe. Joe. Joe, is it with a withdrawal or a deposit? Okay, we're going to find out. Live experimentation on humans right now. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Joe. Happy birthday to you. Okay. All right, let's find out all the birthdays in the next month. Just kidding. Okay. So, in addition to sharing with the people sitting around you what your withdrawals are and what your deposits are, you need to share them with other people. You can't keep them to yourself. In order for you to build trusting relationships with your colleagues and your members and your direct reports and your families, you need to tell them, but you also need to ask them. What counts as a deposit for you? How can I make your day? And what is something that I'm doing that actually isn't working for the relationship? It may be working from my perspective, but isn't working from yours. What do you need me to stop doing? So that's an action I'd like to invite you all to take. And what I want to share with you now is a lesson in behavior modification from Garden Grove, California. Garden Grove, California had the same problem that so many of our communities have, which were in the school zones, cars were speeding through. They were speeding through without paying attention to what the speed limit was in the school zone. And like so many other communities that we know from home or from travel, they tried a number of different strategies to try to get people to slow down to minimize the risk of accidents happening in the school zone. So one of the things that they tried was increasing the number of radar guns being used in the area. And in fact, even increasing the radar didn't change the phenomenon of people speeding through school zones. Another thing that they tried to do was to increase the number of fines, so giving people greater and greater consequences for speeding through the skill zone. The other thing that they tried to do that also didn't work was to hire more traffic cops. Now, maybe they needed to hire some more updated traffic cops. Perhaps that was the problem, but even the presence of more police didn't improve what was going on. And in fact, after much experimentation with radar, with consequences, and the presence of television traffic cops, they found that there was only one thing that made a difference, but the difference that it made was dramatic. Yes, they posted the speed that you were supposed to observe, and they provided instant feedback. Instant feedback. How many of you have ever seen a sign like this? Right? So, amazingly, despite the fact that they used all these other things that we would think would work, it was the presence of instantaneous feedback that made the difference. And not only did people slow down, they slowed down for an average of 10 miles beyond the school zone. So it wasn't just at the site that the improvement was happening, it had long-lasting impact. Now, this is kind of strange, right? This seems kind of puzzling, because one of the things that we think about when we say, okay, so great, they told me how fast I'm going, I believe I have a tool in my car that could tell me how fast I'm going. This was not new information, right? We didn't all of a sudden provide access. There was no way for me to know how quickly I was going. My car doesn't provide such a thing, right? We have access to that information, but that didn't make a difference. The new zones that were giving instant feedback used the same old radar that the radar guns were using, right? So that wasn't new. And we would think that having an immediate and painful consequence would be enough of a deterrent, but it wasn't. The fact of the matter was, it was the instant feedback in the moment so that people could monitor and change their own behavior that had the best impact. And in fact, those feedback signs are the things that are now used in far more school zones than any other kind of technology or existence of police or anything else. And it is also one of the most cost-effective ways to change behavior. So here's our takeaway from this. If we give people meaningful feedback about their actions in real time, right? Not 2 weeks later, not at your annual performance review, but in real time, and then give them an opportunity to modify those actions, we will push them towards more effective actions and behaviors. I invite you to try it, and I invite you to think about how you can apply the model of instant feedback to your JCCs, whether it's with your members or your staff. Where do you think you could be giving people more instant feedback? Yes? Beautiful. So in the moment, you don't wait the next day to call them. In the moment, right, you flash a digitized screen, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. Good. Excellent. I love that. Anyone else have an idea of where you might use instantaneous feedback to drive behavior change? Any other thoughts on that? Yes. At check-in when somebody brings their membership ID card, so you would give them positive feedback. Great. And when somebody doesn't do it, you would tell them right away, this is really important and here's why. Good. Excellent. So I invite you to use the instant feedback model, which causes an awful lot less stress for us than the model many of us use, which is the delayed feedback and then imagining a consequence and then creating a nightmare in our head about how the other person is going to react to the consequence, and then they quit their job or they take their membership elsewhere. We lose our job. We wind up destitute. We have to move in with our parents and live in a basement, and nobody will ever love us, right? So that's the model that we use. I invite you to try this one. It's a lot easier to use. And the fact of the matter is like anything else, choosing to give somebody feedback instantaneously, choosing to put deposits in our relationship bank account is a perspective that we hold. And Viktor Frankl, author and Holocaust survivor, shares with us that man's last freedom is his freedom to choose how he will react in any given situation. We don't know how somebody will react to the instant feedback. All we can do is try it and find out whether it counts as a deposit or a withdrawal for them, and then be open to what might happen next. So I want to spend a couple of minutes, my remaining minutes, talking a little bit about the importance of perspective, about having another way to think about some of the challenges that we all face in our very, very busy work and lives. Perspective is all about what it is you choose to focus on, what it is that you choose to see in any situation. So our lucky guy here is so happy to be rescued. Boat, he cries, except somebody else is expecting to be rescued all along. So we get to choose the perspective that we want to help us through those really tricky days, because all of them have those really tricky days in our JCCs. So let's try on a few perspectives, and I'm going to ask you for a show of hands if this perspective sometimes feels like you. So failure is not an option. Please put your hand out. Okay, so I see a lot of people who hold that perspective. And if this next perspective also feels like you, please put your hand up. You tried your best, and you failed miserably. The lesson is, don't try. Any of you here hold that perspective? Okay. So we've got quite a few for the first, not too many for the second, and our third one from Thomas Edison. I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 things that do not work. How many of you hold that perspective? And the beautiful thing that you have all just demonstrated here is that multiple perspectives can be true at once. So many of you held your hand up for the first and the third, because you can have both perspectives at once. but you get to choose which perspective are you going to hold on to that's going to get you a little closer to what it is you see for yourself, for your relationships, and for your JCCs. One of my favorite perspectives that I like to keep in mind is Julia's perspective. So Julia Child, as many of us know, was way ahead of her time. She was one of the first female chefs. She was famous for being a French chef who wasn't really French. And she also had one of the earliest cooking shows before there was the Food Network. And in one famous episode of Julia Child's French cooking show, she was in front of the audience of millions of viewers, and she was making, amazingly, a giant latka, a giant potato pancake. And she had it in her pan, and she was getting ready to teach the audience. She said, I'm getting ready to flip this. And when you flip anything, you're welcome that I'm not doing the voice, by the way. When you flip anything, she said, you need to have the courage of your convictions. And with that, she released the pancake into the air, and half of it went back into the pan, and the other half wound up splattered all over the stove in front of a television audience. So what did Julia do? Did she pass out? Did she faint? Did she say cut? There was no cut. She scooped up the rest of that potato pancake and she packed it into the pan. And she said to the audience, you see, I clearly did not have the courage of my convictions. That was an example of what not to do. And she said, besides, if you mess up, just put it back in the pan. And then she said what I think is the wisest piece of perspective, after all, who is going to see? Now, she, of course, had millions of people who were going to see, but so often we spend our lives believing that everybody can see every single mistake that we make, and the fact of the matter is we're all focusing on our own stuff. We're too busy to be looking at everybody else's. If Julia can drop her latka on national television, I invite you to think about who really is going to see before you have a chance to remedy it and make it right. So, a few perspectives I want to share with you in closing today. Let's find out Joy's perspective. What does Joy remember when times get tough? Here's what Joy thinks about. Joy says, every day I say to myself something that Avraham Infeld said to me years ago. Think to yourself, what have I done today to ensure the continuation of the Jewish people? Joy continuously runs her life, home, and work by that thought. That's what Joy thinks about when times get tough. What about Mark? What's Mark's perspective? Mark's perspective is that we should all spend the time and make the effort to build relationships before you attempt to do anything with children, families, or colleagues. Otherwise, nobody is going to listen or care about what it is you have to say. So build those relationships first. Put those deposits into the relationship bank account before you ask anybody for anything. What about Alan's perspective? Alan's perspective is his dad's favorite saying. There is a destiny which makes us brothers. None goes his way alone. What we put into the lives of others comes back into our own. Gustavo's perspective is right on his desk. When things get tricky for Gustavo, Gustavo looks at a picture that he has of his family on his desk, and he uses it to remind himself that these are the most important moments in life. And finally, Carrie. When things get tough for Carrie, Carrie has actually borrowed a perspective that works for her. Just keep swimming. So in conclusion, I want to remind you that you have the choice about the perspective you take on your next Oy Vey day. Hopefully nobody will ever semi-deface you and you have to walk back into your house to face what it is that has happened as a result of the defacing. But I want to invite you to, perhaps like Carrie did, borrow a perspective that has worked for me and I think really speaks to the work that all of you do. And it's the perspective of Jim Henson, who died at the age of 53 with a battle with pneumonia, but gave us characters that we have all known and loved for our lives. Perspectives ranging from It's Not Easy Being Green, from Kermit the Frog, to the Swedish chef's famous perspective, Fern de Gurn de Gurn de Gurn, I believe it was. And I invite you to borrow Jim Henson's perspective because this is what I think about you. Jim says, "My hope is to leave the world a bit better than when I got here. And I want to invite you to share a final perspective with me. The old perspective that we could have chosen is that you clap for the outside speaker. But I want to invite anybody who feels that they are a part of making the world a little bit better than it was when you got here to please stand up. If you believe that this perspective is about you, please stand up. I want to invite you of the perspective that the person next to you deserves a deposit by thanking them for the work that they're doing. And to please give yourself a round of applause.